Date is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I know we have serious business to address, but before we do, I did feel the need to revisit the fantastical story of the fabulist in chief. That would be Mr. 10%, the big guy, President Biden, and Uncle Bozy, who was eaten by cannibals, he insinuated. Well,
Stop it.
Peter Ducey asked KJP about that at the press briefing, and here's what the White House spokeswoman had to say.
There's no evidence of that. And why is he saying that his uncle was eaten by cannibals? That is a bad way to go.
He lost his life. It's not, look, I'm not, we should not make jokes about
It's
this.
not.
Wait.
President Biden said that his uncle was eaten by cannibals.
I mean, your last line, it's for a laugh. It's for a funny statement. And he takes this very seriously. His uncle, who served and protected this country, lost his life serving. And that should matter.
Don't joke about cannibals. She really does, KJP, drive me nuts listening to her. She is such a dim bulb, really. That should matter. If anybody is questioning the service of his uncle, we're questioning his Commander McBragg routine. You know who should be the White House spokesman for President Biden?
Who?
Brian Williams.
Oh.
They could see who makes up the most fantastical stories.
Yeah, that's true.
Boy. Anyway, this, by the way, while we were talking about whether or not any members of the president's family had been devoured by cannibals, this was going on in capital cities like our neighbor to the north, where they've got that grade school drama teacher they made the prime minister.
Wonder how his divorce is going.
We were just talking about what's going on college campuses. How about what's going on in downtown Ottawa?
From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. When I say from the river to the sea, you reply with Palestine is almost free, because our resistance attacks are proof that we are almost free. October 7th is proof that we are almost free. Long live October 7th. Long live the resistance. Long live the Intifada.
Long live October 7th. Long live the resistance. Long live Intifada. I think that was Ottawa. It could have been a Chicago City Council meeting, too. They're difficult to distinguish. For more on this, please be joined by Stephen Bucci. Served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Is a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies as well. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It is always my pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Just want to be sensitive. Have any of your family members been eaten by cannibals?
Last time I checked, no. I got a big family, but I think they're all accounted for in more normal circumstances.
Okay. All right. I just don't.
So bizarre, though.
I want to make sure. Yeah.
Because the plane, Uncle Boozy's plane was shot down. Didn't he die in the water?
He disappeared,
Disappeared?
in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, he may have been eaten by something, but probably not cannibals.
They're good swimmers, some of them. I don't know. Anyway, so, Stephen, about this foreign aid bill, $95 billion worth. Ukraine gets the bulk of that, Israel in second place and Taiwan in third. Was this the right move for House Speaker Johnson and congressional Republicans to make?
Well, it remains to be seen whether it'll be the right move for the Speaker. Obviously with the rule we have now where, one person can boot you out of the speaker position, it's a strange setup right now. I think clearly support to Israel needed to happen. I frankly could have seen them give more to Israel, but the amount of aid to the Palestinians in Gaza, I'm sorry. Some of this stuff is such fiction. There's been so much aid pumped in there, and if you look at some of the math, there's been enough aid that has gotten in that the Palestinian people in Gaza should have been fed for the last year, or for a year since this thing started, with no problem at all. So all this starvation and stuff that's going on is frankly manufactured not by Israel but by Hamas. They're the ones, once the stuff gets in there, that don't distribute it to the actual people. What they're doing with it, I don't know. They're feeding it all to their guys. Their guys would all be pretty fat by now. But so the aid part, okay, fine. So they decided to do that. But the part to Ukraine, again, there's such a split over support, continued support to Ukraine. I hope they're putting in a really robust methodology to track where every dime goes, because they're going to be required to do that in the future when somebody starts asking the questions. Not saying that there's a guarantee that they're wasted or anything else, but there's enough people asking that question, serious people, not just crazies, that there's a responsibility from DOD and Department of State to make sure that stuff is all used appropriately and they can account for every bit of it in a positive manner, or there's going to be probably some problems later on.
Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google and Alphabet and all that, he penned this op-ed. Apparently he knows something about Eastern Europe, or at least is pretending to. His op-ed in The Hill, and this was in support of the vote that happened to move the aid out of the House. He writes, the war in Ukraine has entered its third year. This one could prove decisive. Ukraine has a pathway to a military and diplomatic victory, but so does Russia. Putin is amassing a strategic reserve in preparation for a spring offensive. He feels emboldened after a sham re-election to take even more territory. Only more artillery cells and air defense missiles will allow Ukraine to halt Russian advances and turn the tide in a war that threatens its very survival. Ukraine wins if it can continue to counter Russia's onslaught with allied support. Russia wins if the West fails to support Ukraine. That's pretty generic, but is it directionally correct?
I think it is directionally correct, but yeah, it's a bit thin gruel as far as specifics that he's talking about. Putin is clearly continuing his effort to not just keep the part of Ukraine here that he has taken, but to get more of it. That's still what he wants. That's still what he's pushing to the Russian people. It's still what their propaganda is pushing around the world. And Ukraine doesn't want to give it to them. They want their terrain back, and they want to continue to be a sovereign nation with freedom to decide who they associate with and who they don't, not leaving that to Vladimir Putin.
But isn't the argument that's being made by all those flag wavers? I mean, Ukrainian flag wavers, not American, of course. Mm-hmm. The Ukrainian flag wavers in Congress that if Ukraine falls, don't make this about Ukraine, because if Ukraine falls, then other dominoes start falling. Poland gets the next knock on the door. Do you still believe that? Or I mean, I'm not saying that you did believe that, but do you really believe that? Does Putin have the not just the disposition, but the bandwidth to start rolling through former, countries that were formerly behind the curtain and trying to reassemble Mother Russia as it once was? I don't get the sense that he has that capacity. He may have that dream, but I don't think he has that capacity, does he?
I don't think he has the capacity that if Ukraine fell today, that next week he could start the next offensive into another country. It might not be Poland. It could be more than likely the Baltic countries. They're even closer to him and further away from everybody else in NATO, and less robust militarily than Poland. But would that be part of the plan? I think you can't dismiss it as, well, he doesn't really have the capability, and that's really just a pipe dream for him. I mean, who thought taking Ukraine back was, on the plate? But it turned out, and all the experts, including myself, said, well, he's just stomping his feet, doing that exercise on the border. He's never going to actually do this full-up invasion of Ukraine. And then, son of a gun, he did. He is not, he is very, very determined to reestablish what he considers his due as the head of an imperial Russian entity that is a superpower alongside of everybody else. So I don't think, it's not a sure thing, but I don't think it's one we can completely discount, that he would then turn around, maybe not immediately, take a year off as he's done in the past, and then start the next round of nibbling at the neighbors, if you will, and in some cases taking big honking bites like he's done in Ukraine. I don't think we can say that's not a possibility, to be honest with you.
Well, what do the people of Russia think about this? I mean, are they for this, against it?
From what I can ascertain from the things I've read and the people that I trust that have been inside Russia and listened to it, there's a good chunk of the Russian people think this makes perfect sense because they're being fed a line from the Kremlin that Ukraine was tuning up to attack Russia, that, there's Russian people's brave persecution inside of Ukraine. Those folks who believe that propaganda are saying, yeah, go for it, boss. But you've got to remember, they don't really have an option to not say that. Right. But there is significant pushback still, particularly from, the mothers and wives whose husbands and sons are going off to fight in Ukraine about this war. They don't necessarily think it's a great idea, but, they don't have the same sort of channels of dissent that we have in the West. So it's a little hard to tell that. I don't think the Russian people are behind this, but it's to not be behind it is somewhat personally dangerous for Russian citizens.
Right, of course. Right. I mean, this is not something that's done by plebiscite. This is one guy's decision. But I got to tell you, the arguments being made from both sides in defense of this are, really insulting. One, this from Jerry Connolly, who's a Democrat from Virginia, on the House floor during debate.
Some say, well, we have to deal with our border first. The Ukrainian-Russian border is our border.
No, it's not.
No, that's
part of ours first.
Yeah, and then Speaker Johnson saying what we've heard before, including from Democrats, is rather send bullets to Ukraine than our men, than our fighting men and women, as if that's the only choice. If we don't send armaments, then we're ultimately going to be compelled somehow to send American troops. No, we're not. That's not true. Those are both specious arguments as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they need to do a better job of making the argument that they don't have to use the bumper sticker slogans to do it, and that does cheapen the effort. Jerry Connolly is kind of a demagogue, having
clearly
lived in Virginia. He's out there. Speaker Johnson knows better than that and probably could do better. I realize he's dealing with a lot of issues at one time, but that argument is kind of weak sauce.
Well, and it's not just insulting intellectually. It's also insulting to Americans who are suffering real loss. There's this piece in the American Conservative by a gentleman named Jameson Carrier, who is actually running for Congress now in Indiana, but that's secondary. He writes, Monday, April 15th was the 2-year anniversary of the worst day of our life, the day my wife Kathy and I lost our son Joey to fentanyl poisoning. Our family isn't alone. There's been a 1,000% increase in fentanyl deaths among young people from 2020 to 2023. As we know, over 100,000 American sons and daughters are dying every year due to fentanyl. That's more than 300 Americans dying every day from fentanyl poisonings. If a jetliner was going down every day, we would stop everything and get it fixed. So, of course, in addition to all the crime that's been documented as the proximate cause of open borders with just allowing people into this country willy-nilly at their choosing, then you have obviously the drug traffickers and the human traffickers layered on top to the gangbangers and the random criminals. And so, that's the thing that's, I guess, doubly insulting is sort of the moral indignation that comes from the political class about spending money in these foreign theaters when in our backyard we can't seem to muster the political courage to draw a line and say nothing crosses this until this is dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree 100%. The border is a much bigger and much more significant issue to America as a whole, and just if you wanted to rack and stack the vital national interest, protecting your border is way up there. I mean, it's like the most significant. The problem you have right now is the administration doesn't see it that way, and even if you passed a law for that, I'm not sure it would survive the veto because the Democratic Party has such a tight discipline in supporting a Democratic president. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and frankly, it doesn't mean you can't do both. But to do the exterior ones and not do the border is that's kind of it's a miss. That they blew it on that one.
One other issue I just wanted to get your take on too, because it's a little bit below the fold, but important since we're so focused on Putin and everybody in Congress is such a Putin bull. Niger in Africa, we've got commandos and drones, ours, being kicked out of Niger, however you want to pronounce it. And Russia filling the void left by America and the French.
Yeah, that is a significant problem. It is it's not the value of Israel and Hamas or Russia and Ukraine or China and Taiwan, but it is significant. The Russians are making inroads into a lot of these places in Africa in the same way the Chinese have done and the Chinese are doing in Latin America. And that's not something, we would have allowed 25 years ago or a little further back than that. But now everybody's like, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal. That gives them influence. It gives them platforms from which to do other mischief. And it's something we could counter with relatively small footprints and small investments of effort and personnel, and to not do anything about it or to just sort of look the other way like it's not important is somewhat short-sighted in my opinion.
Well, the other issue too is that we lose a strategic location in terms of trying to combat Islamofascism and the terrorist organizations that propagate it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That there's some value in having the connection with those individual nations and their governments, certainly. But in the bigger scheme, you need to be. Africa's a big place. If you're not in Africa, you're not going to get much done from the outside. Coming in periodically, you have to have some sort of enduring relationship, albeit probably minuscule compared to what we do elsewhere. But if you're not there, it's kind of hard to take action when the need arises. And that's the other big reason we have been in there for the last 20, 25 years trying to rebuild those relationships. And now we're just sort of letting them go again.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. He's a visiting fellow at the Hertiage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies now. Stephen Bucci, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Oil investments involve a high degree of risk and actual results may vary. Oil and natural gas keep going up as the Russia conflict escalates. Get in on the next major oil boom now and help the U.S. with your patriotic investment that can potentially pay you monthly income for up to 20 or more years. That's the sound of a producing oil well and the sound of a smart investment. If you're an SEC accredited investor and have at least $25,000 liquid now, you can take advantage of Encore Energy's projects and a huge tax savings for this year. If you invest in